The text came through at 7:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was sitting in my den, the same leather chair I'd owned where I taught Keon to throw a football when he was 6 years old. My phone buzzed on the armrest. I picked it up expecting a work email, maybe a message from my buddy Dante about our fishing trip that weekend. Instead, I read 8 words that knocked the wind clean out of my chest. We decided it's best you don't come to the wedding. We, not I. Not Dad. Can we talk? Something came up. Not even a phone call where I could hear my son's voice and know if he meant it. Just we. I stared at that message for 3 full minutes, read it over and over like maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Like maybe autocorrect had glitched, and my only child hadn't just uninvited me to his wedding through a text message. A text message. After 26 years of being his father, after everything I'd sacrificed, everything I'd given, everything I'd built. 8 words. Sent at 7:47 p.m. on a regular Tuesday, while I sat alone in my den. My hands were shaking. Not from sadness, though that would come later, from something deeper. From the kind of cold, quiet fury that settles into your bones when you realize you've been played for a fool. Because I knew in my gut. Those weren't Keon's words. That text had Dominique Price written all over it. See, I'd been watching her work for 11 months now. Ever since Keon brought her home for Thanksgiving last year, and she looked around my modest 3-bedroom house in Decatur like she was walking through a landfill. I saw the way her eyes did the math, the 10-year-old Honda in the driveway, the furniture that was clean but not expensive, the neighborhood that was good but not flashy. She smiled at me that day, shook my hand with both of hers, called me sir, complimented the collard greens I made from my mama's recipe. But I caught it, that flicker in her eyes, that quick calculation of what I was worth, and she decided I wasn't worth much at all. What Dominique didn't know, what nobody knew except my accountant and my lawyer, was that I'd spent 30 years building something most people couldn't imagine. I'm talking about real wealth, generational wealth. The kind you don't flash around because that's how you lose it. I started as a plumber's apprentice at 19, worked my way up, got my contractor's license, started my own company at 28. By 35, I had 12 employees and contracts with 3 major property management firms in Atlanta. By 40, I'd quietly purchased my first rental property. By 50, I owned 17 properties, commercial and residential, all paid off, all generating passive income while I still showed up to job sites in my work boots and my old truck, because that's who I am. That's who my father raised me to be. The money was never for me. It was for Keon, for his future, for the family I hoped he'd build one day. And speaking of money, that $4,200 I'd been sending him every month for the past 3 years, the help with rent that let him and Dominique live in that nice apartment in Buckhead, the money that paid for his car note, his insurance, his credit card bills that he didn't think I knew about. That was my money, my sacrifice, my love, converted into direct deposits twice a month because my son asked, and I couldn't say no. Dominique thought she was marrying into struggle. She thought Keon was the come-up, with his software developer salary and his potential. She saw me as dead weight, the embarrassing country father who'd just get in the way. Baby girl didn't do her research. I sat in that chair for an hour after receiving that text. The sun went down, the house got dark. I didn't turn on a single light, just sat there, breathing slow, letting the anger crystallize into something useful. Then I did something I should have done a long time ago. I opened my banking app, navigated to recurring transfers, and cancelled every single payment going to Keon's account. The rent supplement, the car payment, the credit card bailouts, all of it. Gone in 4 taps of my finger. I felt nothing. No guilt, no hesitation. Just a cold, clean clarity I hadn't experienced in years. You want to cut me out? Fine. But you don't get to cut me out and keep my money. That's not how this works. I went to bed that night knowing exactly what was coming. They'd notice within a week. The first of the month was 6 days away, and that rent wasn't going to pay itself. It took them 4 days. My phone rang on Saturday morning at 8:15 a.m. Keon's name on the screen, first time he'd called me in 2 months. I let it ring. He called again, and again. Then a text. Dad, call me back. It's important. I waited 3 hours before I responded with 2 words. I'm busy. What happened next was exactly what I expected. At 2:30 that afternoon, a white Mercedes pulled into my driveway. I watched from the window as Dominique stepped out of the driver's seat in designer sunglasses and heels that cost more than most people's car payments. Keon got out the passenger side, looking like a man being led to his own execution. She'd made him come, probably told him to fix this or else, probably didn't even give him a choice. That's when the real anger hit. Not at her. I'd already accepted what she was, but at him, at my son, who I'd raised to be a man, walking 3 steps behind this woman, like a child following his mama to the principal's office. Where was the boy I taught to stand tall? Where was the young man who used to tell me everything? What had she done to him? I opened the door before they could knock. Well, I said, keeping my voice level, this is a surprise. Thought you decided it was best I don't come around. Keon couldn't meet my eyes. Dad, look, about that text. Jerome. Dominique cut him off like he wasn't even speaking, just stepped right past him and addressed me directly, using my first name like we were equals, like she hadn't spent the last year pretending I didn't exist. We need to talk about the money. And there it was, 30 seconds in, and she'd already shown her hand. I stepped aside and let them in, led them to the living room, but didn't offer them a seat. Didn't offer them water. Just stood there with my arms crossed, waiting. Dominique did a slow scan of the room. The old couch. The family photos on the wall, the television that wasn't a flat screen, and that look came over her face again, that look of barely concealed contempt. There's been some confusion with the bank transfers, she said, speaking to me like I was a customer service representative who'd messed up her order. The rent is due on Monday and nothing came through this month. Keon said you usually... I know what I usually do. So there was a mistake? No mistake. She blinked. The smile stayed frozen on her face, but I saw something shift behind her eyes. I don't understand. It's real simple, Dominique. I let her name sit heavy in the air. When you're family, I take care of you. When you're not family, I don't. What's that supposed to mean? It means I got uninvited to my only son's wedding through a text message. Means someone decided I wasn't worth a phone call or a conversation. Means whatever relationship I thought I had with my son apparently doesn't exist anymore. I looked at Keon, who still couldn't meet my eyes. So if I'm not family, why would I be sending family money? Jerome. Dominique's voice got tight. You're being dramatic. Am I? It was just a wedding invitation issue. We're reworking the guest list because of venue capacity. It's not personal. Guest list. I almost laughed. Your mama's coming though, right? Your sister? Your cousins from Ohio? All 60 of them made the venue capacity, but the groom's only living parent didn't make the cut. Keon finally spoke. Dad, can we just— No. Dominique's hand shot out and grabbed his arm. Actually grabbed him like he was property. Let me handle this. Before we continue, please drop a comment if you've ever experienced something like this. We'd love to hear your story, and subscribe to the channel to help us grow. She turned back to me with a different look now. The pretense was gone. The sweet smile, the respectful, "Sir." All of that theatre had been stripped away, and underneath it was something cold and calculating. Let me be real with you, Jerome. Keon is a grown man. He's about to be married. And at some point, you have to accept that you're not the most important person in his life anymore. That's me now. His wife, his partner, his future. She tilted her head like she was explaining something to a slow child. Now, the mature thing to do would be to apologize for overreacting, reinstate the payments, and trust that we'll work out the wedding details in a way that makes everyone comfortable. The immature thing would be to let your ego damage your relationship with your son over something as small as a text message. I stood there for a moment, just taking her in. This woman who'd looked at my modest house and decided I was nobody. Who'd systematically isolated my son from everyone who loved him. Who'd come into my home and spoken to me like I was the help. "You done?" I asked. "Excuse me? Are you done talking? Because I got a few things to say, and I want to make sure you're finished first." Her eyes narrowed. "Go ahead. First thing, you're right about one thing. Keon is a grown man, which means the decisions he makes are on him, including the decision to let you send that text. Including the decision to stand there right now like he lost his spine somewhere in the parking lot." Keon flinched but didn't speak. "Second thing, I've been sending money to my son for 3 years, 60 months, over $200,000 in direct support, not counting what I paid for his college, his first car, his security deposit, his dental bills, his laptop, his suits for job interviews. I kept receipts for all of it, Dominique. Bank statements, transaction records, dates and amounts, going back years." Her expression flickered, just for a second. But I caught it. Third thing, and this is the important part. I didn't stop those payments because of the wedding. I stopped them because something ain't right here. Something ain't been right for a while, and I should have trusted my gut months ago. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm done funding whatever this is. I gestured between them. You want to cut me out? Go ahead. Build your life. Pay your own rent. But you're going to do it without my checkbook backing you up. Dominique's composure cracked. Just a bit. You can't do this. Already did. Keon. She turned to him, voice sharp. Are you going to let him talk to me like this? And this is the part that broke something in me. This is the moment I'll carry with me until I die. My son, my only child, my greatest joy, the little boy I used to carry on my shoulders at the fair, looked at his father and then looked at her. I could see him weighing it, measuring what mattered. Dad, his voice cracked. Can you please just— we need that money, just until the wedding. Then we'll figure something out. Not I'm sorry, not let's talk about this, not I love you and I don't know how we got here. Just, we need that money. That's when I knew. That's when I saw it clear as day. She'd taken my son, hollowed him out, and replaced everything I'd put into him with whatever she wanted instead. And the only question left was whether he was a victim or an accomplice. Get out! Dominique's mouth fell open. What? Both of you. Out of my house. Now. You can't— this is my property. I'm asking you to leave. Don't make me ask again. Something ugly flashed across her face. True anger now, true hatred, and she leaned in close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume, and she said something I will never forget. "You bitter old man. You think you matter? You think any of this matters? Keon doesn't need you. He has me now, and when we're married, when his name is on my accounts and mine is on his, you'll be nothing but a bad memory. A lesson in what happens to men who can't let go." She said it quiet, almost a whisper, like she was telling me a cigarette. And something about the way she said it, when his name is on my accounts and mine is on his, set off an alarm in my head that hasn't stopped ringing since. I watched them leave, watched that white Mercedes back out of my driveway, watched my son in the passenger seat, head down, never once looking back at the house where he grew up. That night, I sat in my den again. Same chair, same view. But something was different now. The sadness was still there, underneath everything, but on top of it was purpose, clarity. I grabbed my laptop and started searching. Dominique Price, age 28, born in Columbus, Ohio. Graduated from somewhere with something. That's what she'd told us. But when I started digging, really digging, past the surface, past the Instagram profile and the LinkedIn page, I found something else. Court records, civil suits, a bankruptcy filing at age 23, and a criminal complaint that had been quietly dismissed in 2019. My hands went cold. I looked at the clock. 11:47 p.m. Too late to call anyone. Too early to sleep. So I kept digging. Page after page, record after record. A picture started forming, and it was uglier than anything I could have imagined. Then I found it. A fraud alert. From a credit monitoring service I'd set up years ago and forgotten about. An alert I'd missed because it went to an old email address. Someone had applied for a credit card in my son's name 4 months ago. A card with a $25,000 limit. A card that was now maxed out. An application signed with a signature that looked like Keon's handwriting, but wasn't. I'd know my son's signature anywhere. I'd watched him practice it for hours when he got his first checkbook at 16. This wasn't his signature. This was a forgery. And the address listed on the application? A P.O. box I'd never seen before. I sat back in my chair, laptop screen glowing in the dark room, and felt the world shift beneath me. This wasn't just about a wedding anymore. This wasn't about disrespect or hurt feelings or family drama. My son was being robbed, systematically, deliberately, by the woman he was about to marry, and I had exactly 37 days until the wedding to prove it. To understand how I got here, sitting in the dark at midnight, staring at evidence that my future daughter-in-law was committing fraud against my own son, you need to understand where I came from. I grew up in a shotgun house in Macon, Georgia. 4 rooms in a straight line, screen door that never closed right, and a front porch where my daddy sat every evening after 12-hour shifts at the textile mill. We didn't have much, but we had enough. And more than that, we had a code. My daddy, Otis Henderson, was the kind of man who believed that how you carry yourself matters more than what you carry in your wallet. He worked 43 years at that mill, never missed a day, never complained, and every Friday he'd come home with his paycheck, hand my mama exactly 80% of it, and put the other 20% in a coffee can he kept buried in the backyard. When I was 12, he showed me that coffee can. "Jerome," he said, "a man who spends everything he earns is a slave to his next paycheck. But a man who saves, who builds something quiet and steady, that man is free. Nobody can take his freedom, because nobody knows he has it." I never forgot that lesson. When I was 19, My daddy died of a heart attack on the floor of that textile mill. They called my mama at 2:15 in the afternoon. By 2:45, she was a widow with 3 kids and no savings except what was buried in the backyard. That coffee can had $47,000 in it. 43 years of work, 43 years of sacrifice. And not a soul in Macon knew Otis Henderson had a dime to his name. He died wearing the same work boots he'd worn for a decade, driving the same truck he'd driven since 1982. But he left his family with enough to survive. That's when I understood. Wealth isn't about showing off. Wealth is about protection. It's about making sure the people you love never have to suffer when you're gone. I moved to Atlanta at 20 with $200 in my pocket and my daddy's lesson burned into my brain. Got a job as a plumber's apprentice, working for an old man named Clarence Booker, who taught me everything about pipes, pressure, and professionalism. Clarence used to say, "Do the job right, charge fair, and never lie to a customer. Everything else takes care of itself." By 25, I had my journeyman's license. By 28, my contractor's license. By 30, I'd saved enough to start Henderson Plumbing and Mechanical Services with 1 truck and 0 employees. That first year nearly killed me. I worked 18-hour days, ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner most nights, lost 15 pounds because I kept forgetting to take care of myself. But by the end of year 1, I'd made a profit. Small but real. Year 2, I hired my first employee. Year 5, I had a fleet of 6 trucks and contracts with property management companies across the metro area. Year 10, I was clearing $500,000 annually, and nobody knew it but my accountant. Because I never changed. Never bought the flashy car or the big house or the designer clothes. I lived below my means, saved aggressively, and invested in real estate when the market crashed in 2008 and properties were selling for pennies on the dollar. While everyone else was panicking, I was buying. 17 properties by the time I turned 50. All paid off, all generating rental income, a portfolio worth over $4 million, and I still drove my old truck to job sites because that's who I am. I'm telling you all this not to brag. I'm telling you because you need to understand what Dominique Price walked into when she looked at my 3-bedroom house in Decatur and decided I wasn't worth her time. She saw the surface. She didn't see the foundation. Now let me tell you about Keon. My son was born on March 15th, 1998, at 4:47 in the morning. I was 26 years old, and his mama, Camille, was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. She was a nurse at Grady Memorial, and she'd stolen my heart the first time I walked into the ER with a cut on my hand from a busted pipe. We got married 6 months after we met. Keon came 2 years later, and for 11 years, we were the happiest family in Georgia. Then Camille got sick, ovarian cancer, stage 4 by the time they caught it. She fought for 14 months, but the disease was stronger than the treatments. She passed on a Sunday morning in October, with me holding one hand and Keon holding the other. He was 13 years old. I raised that boy by myself from that day forward. Did the best I could, which wasn't always good enough. Made mistakes, sure. What single father doesn't? But I showed up. Every basketball game, every parent-teacher conference, every late night when he couldn't sleep because he missed his mama. I was there. Keon was smart. Smarter than me by a mile. Got a scholarship to Georgia Tech, graduated with honors in computer science, landed a good job at a software company making 6 figures right out of college. I was so proud of him, I could barely speak at his graduation. That's when I started sending him money. Not because he needed it, his salary was more than enough, but because I wanted to give him a cushion, a safety net, The kind of security my daddy gave me with that coffee can. I figured he'd save most of it, build his own foundation. I was wrong. Looking back now, I can see exactly when things started to change. It was about 18 months before that wedding invitation text. Keon called me on a random Wednesday night, which was unusual. He normally texted. "Dad," he said, and I could hear something different in his voice. Lighter. Distracted. I met someone. Her name was Dominique. She was a marketing consultant. They'd met at a friend's birthday party, and according to Keon, she was unlike anyone he'd ever dated. "She's ambitious, Dad. She's got goals. She's going places." I was happy for him, genuinely. Camille and I had always hoped Keon would find someone who challenged him, who pushed him to be better. So when he asked if he could bring her to Thanksgiving, I said yes without hesitation. That was my first mistake. She walked into my house that November, and I felt it immediately. That cold assessment behind the warm smile, the way her eyes catalogued everything in the room, the furniture, the fixtures, the photographs on the wall, and found it all lacking. But I told myself I was being paranoid, told myself I was just an overprotective father who wasn't ready to share his son, told myself to give her a chance. So I did. And over the next several months, I watched her work. It was subtle at first. Little things that seemed innocent on their own, but formed a pattern when you stepped back and looked at the whole picture. She started scheduling things on days when Keon and I normally talked. Sunday dinners became couples activities. Our monthly fishing trips got replaced by her family events in Ohio. He stopped calling as often. When he did call, the conversations were shorter, more surface level, like he was checking a box instead of connecting with his father. Then came the comments, little digs disguised as jokes. "Your dad still drives that old truck?" she'd ask, laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. "That house really takes you back to the 90s, huh?" And my favorite, "It's sweet that he's so simple. Some people just aren't meant for more, you know?" Keon would laugh along, or worse, he'd stay silent. By spring, I was seeing my son, maybe once a month. By summer, it was every other month. By fall, I was learning about major life events through social media instead of phone calls. He proposed to her in September. I found out because his cousin Alicia saw the announcement on Instagram and called me, confused about why I wasn't in the pictures. I called Keon that night. He apologized, said it happened fast, said they'd been so busy with work and planning, said Dominique wanted to do a big announcement online before telling family individually. She wanted to control the narrative, he said, like that was a normal thing for an engagement. I should have pushed harder, should have demanded answers, should have driven to Atlanta and sat my son down and asked him what the hell was happening. But I didn't. Because I kept telling myself the same thing. He's a grown man. He gets to make his own choices. You can't control his life. That's what she was counting on. The money, though. The money was the thing I couldn't let go of. See, I'd been tracking every dollar I sent Keon since the beginning, not because I wanted to hold it over his head, but because that's how my brain works. I keep records of everything. It's the contractor in me. Document everything. Keep receipts. Cover your back. Over 3 years, I'd sent him $151,200 in direct support. That included rent supplements, car payments, insurance, credit card bills he asked me to help with, and random emergencies that seemed to pop up every few months. Plus the $65,000 I'd paid for his college that his scholarship didn't cover. Plus the $18,000 I gave him as a down payment fund when he said he wanted to buy a house someday. Over $230,000 total. Money I never expected to see again because that's not how I operate. When I give freely. But here's what kept nagging at me. Where was it all going? Keon made good money. Real good money. Combined with what I was sending, he should have been living comfortable and stacking savings like his daddy taught him. Instead, every few months, there was a new crisis. A new bill he couldn't cover. A new unexpected expense. It didn't add up. I started paying closer attention about 6 months before that wedding invitation text. Started asking questions that Keon seemed uncomfortable answering. How's the savings account looking? It's fine. Dad. You putting anything into retirement? Dominique handles all that. That answer stopped me cold. Dominique handles all that. My son, who graduated with honors in computer science, who could code complex algorithms and solve problems I couldn't begin to understand, was letting his girlfriend manage his finances. Why would she be handling your money, son? It just makes sense. She's better at that stuff than me. Better at what? Adding and subtracting? He got defensive then. Said I was being old-fashioned. Said couples share responsibilities, and it was none of my business how they organized their household. I backed off. Another mistake. 3 months later, he asked me for $8,000. Said he'd gotten behind on some things and needed to catch up. Said it wouldn't happen again. I sent it. But this time, I asked for something in return. A credit report. Just want to make sure you're in good shape, I told him. Nothing personal, just fatherly concern. He said he'd send it. He never did. That was January. By March, he was engaged. By September, I was uninvited to the wedding. And now, in October, I was sitting in my den at 1 a.m., staring at evidence that someone had opened a credit card in my son's name without his knowledge. Or at least, I hoped it was without his knowledge. Because the alternative, that Keon knew about this and was complicit, was something I wasn't ready to consider. I spent the rest of that night going through every financial document I could find. Old tax returns I'd helped Keon file. Bank statements he'd accidentally forwarded to me instead of his accountant. Credit reports from before Dominique entered the picture. And then I found something that made my blood run cold. An email, buried in my spam folder from 8 months ago, from a credit monitoring service I'd set up for Keon when he turned 18, one of those identity protection things I'd paid for and forgotten about. The email was an alert. Someone had applied for a loan in Keon's name, a personal loan, $40,000, from an online lender I'd never heard of. The application had been approved. The money had been disbursed to a bank account that wasn't any account I'd ever seen on Keon's statements. And the signature on the digital application looked just enough like Keon's handwriting to pass a casual review, but wrong in ways only a father would notice. The K was too sharp. The loop on the lowercase e was backwards. Small things. Invisible unless you knew what to look for. I knew what to look for. My hands were shaking as I opened another tab and started searching. This time, I was looking for everything I could find about identity theft within relationships, about financial abuse in marriages, about the legal protections available to victims. What I found made me sick. There's a term for what Dominique was doing. It's called coerced debt. It happens when someone in a relationship uses their partner's identity to take out loans, open credit cards, and rack up debt without the victim's knowledge or full consent. It's more common than people think, and it's devastatingly hard to prove because the signatures look legitimate, and the victim is often too embarrassed or too controlled to report it. I thought about Keon standing in my living room 2 days ago. The way he couldn't meet my eyes, the way he'd asked for money like he was reading from a script, the way Dominique had grabbed his arm like she owned him. My son wasn't a co-conspirator. My son was a victim, and I had 35 days to save him from marrying his abuser. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my lawyer, Ezekiel Banks. Zeke had been handling my business affairs for 15 years. Contracts, liability issues, property acquisitions. He wasn't a criminal attorney, but he knew people who were. "Jerome," he said, when I explained what I'd found, "this is serious. If what you're saying is accurate, we're talking about identity theft, fraud, possibly even conspiracy. But we need to be careful. One wrong move, and she could claim you're harassing her, interfering with their relationship. She could turn your son against you even more." "He's already turned," I said. "What else I got to lose?" "His future. If she's really doing what you think she's doing, she's not going to stop at credit cards and loans. Once they're married, everything he has becomes accessible to her. His income, his retirement, his inheritance." He stopped. "What?" I asked. "Jerome, your estate. The trust you set up for Keon. If she knows about it, if she marries him and then something happens to him." I felt like someone had poured ice water down my spine. The trust. I'd set it up 10 years ago, when my accountant told me I needed to start thinking about estate planning. It was designed to transfer my assets to Keon upon my death, with provisions for his future children. Nobody knew about it except Zeke and my accountant, Roslyn. But trusts have to be filed somewhere. Documents exist. Paper trails can be followed by someone determined enough. What if Dominique had found out? What if that's why she was so eager to marry my son? Not for his salary, but for what he stood to inherit. "We need to lock that down," Zeke said, like he was reading my mind. "Today, before the wedding. I'll need you to come into the office so we can review the terms and make modifications." "What kind of modifications?" "The kind that make it very difficult for anyone other than Keon to access that money. And if Keon is being controlled or manipulated, provisions that require independent verification of his mental competency before any major withdrawals." I exhaled. "Do it." My second call was to Roslyn Carter, my accountant. I told her everything: the cancelled payments, the confrontation, the fraud alerts. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Jerome, I need to tell you something. About 6 months ago, someone called my office asking about your business. Said they were from a bank, verifying information for a loan application. They asked about your annual revenue, your assets, your net worth." My heart started pounding. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing. I don't discuss client information with anyone who can't verify their identity through proper channels. When I asked for their name and callback number, they hung up." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Honestly, I thought it was a scam call. We get them all the time. I reported it to the fraud department at the bank and moved on. But now, given what you're telling me..." She trailed off. Someone had been investigating my finances, trying to find out what I was worth, and I had a pretty good idea who. My third call was to an old friend, a man I'd known since my 20s, when we both worked under Clarence Booker, learning the trade. His name was Dante Williams, and after leaving plumbing, he'd gone into a different profession entirely. Private investigation. Dante was the best in the business, discreet, thorough, and absolutely ruthless when it came to uncovering the truth. He'd helped me with background checks on contractors over the years, and once he'd helped a friend of mine expose a cheating spouse. His methods were always legal, barely, but his results were undeniable. "D," I said when he picked up, "I need your help." "Talk to me, Jay." I told him everything, start to finish, the text message, the confrontation, the fraud alerts, my suspicions about Dominique. When I finished, the line was quiet for a moment. Then Dante said something that chilled me to the bone. "Jerome, that name, Dominique Price, it sounds familiar. Give me a few hours, I want to check something." Check what? A case I worked about 3 years ago. Another father. Different city. His son got engaged to a woman who seemed perfect until the money started disappearing. By the time he came to me, she'd drained about 200,000 los and was about to disappear. What happened? We caught her. Turned everything over to the police. She did 18 months in state prison. What was her name? Another pause. Longer this time. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I remember the details of the scam. It was sophisticated, multiple fake identities, forged documents. She'd target men with wealthy parents, men who didn't know they were inheriting money, but she'd figured it out through public records and social engineering. I gripped the phone so hard I thought it might crack. Are you saying this could be the same woman? I'm saying I need to check. If it is, if Dominique Price is connected to the woman from my old case, then your son isn't just being scammed. He's being hunted by a professional. And you've got a lot less time than you think. He hung up. I sat in my den, morning light streaming through the windows, and felt something I hadn't felt since the day Camille was diagnosed. Fear. Real, bone-deep fear. Not for myself, for my son, for the boy I'd raised alone, the young man I'd tried to prepare for the world. He was in danger, and he didn't even know it. Worse, he wouldn't believe me if I told him. I looked at the calendar on my wall. October 12th. The wedding was scheduled for November 18th. 37 days. 37 days to gather evidence, to build a case, to find a way to reach my son through whatever spell she had him under. My phone buzzed. A text from Dante. 2 words that changed everything. It's her. Dante's office was in a strip mall in East Point, sandwiched between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. The sign on the door just said, Williams Consulting, because Dante believed that discretion started before you even walked through the entrance. I'd been there maybe 5 times in 15 years. Every visit had been about business, contractor background checks, that kind of thing. But when I walked through that door on the afternoon of October 12th, it wasn't about business anymore. It was about saving my son's life. Dante was waiting for me in the back office. He was 62 years old, built like a linebacker who'd retired but never stopped working out, with salt and pepper hair cropped close to his skull and reading glasses perched on his nose. Spread across his desk were file folders, printed photographs, and what looked like court documents. He didn't waste time with small talk. Sit down, Jerome. This is worse than I thought. I sat. My heart was already racing before he said another word. Dominique Price isn't her real name. He slid a photograph across the desk, a mug shot from what looked like about 5 years ago. The woman in the picture was younger, thinner in the face, with different hair. But those eyes were the same. That cold, calculating look I'd seen in my living room. Her birth name is Monique Lawson, born in Cleveland, Ohio, in 1995. First arrest at 19 for check fraud. Charges dropped when the victim refused to testify. Turned out she was dating his son and the family didn't want the embarrassment. He slid another document across. A court filing. Second arrest at 21. Identity theft and credit card fraud. She'd gotten engaged to a young man from a wealthy family in Cincinnati. Over the course of their relationship, she opened 11 credit cards in his name, took out 2 personal loans, and forged his signature on a home equity line of credit against his grandmother's property. How'd she get access to the grandmother's property? She convinced the grandson to add her name to the deed as a wedding gift, told him it was romantic, a symbol of their commitment. He was 23 and in love. He believed her. I felt sick. This was a pattern, a playbook she'd used before. Dante continued. That case went to trial. She was convicted on 4 counts of fraud and sentenced to 3 years, served 18 months at the Ohio Reformatory for Women, got out early for good behavior, changed her name legally to Dominique Price within 6 months of release. And nobody flagged this? When she started dating my son, nobody checked? Why would they? She has a clean record under Dominique Price. New name, new social security number. She claimed identity theft as the reason for the change, which is ironic as hell. New driver's license, new everything. To anyone who didn't dig deep. She looked like a regular woman with a marketing degree and a decent job history. He pulled out another file. This one was thicker. Here's where it gets really bad. 3 years ago, I worked a case in Nashville. Father hired me because his son's fiancée had drained $50,000 from their joint account and disappeared. When I investigated, I found out she'd been running the same scam. Credit cards, loans, all in the son's name. By the time we tracked her down, she'd moved to Atlanta. Atlanta, I repeated. Yeah, I lost her trail about 2 years ago. Thought she'd maybe left the state or gone underground. But when you described Dominique to me yesterday, something clicked. I pulled my old files and started cross-referencing. He handed me a printout, side-by-side photos. On the left, the mugshot of Monique Lawson from 2018. On the right, a screenshot from what looked like a professional headshot. The same woman, older now, more polished. The name under the photo read, Dominique Price, marketing consultant. Same woman, different costume. Jerome, your son isn't just dating a con artist. He's engaged to a predator with a decade of experience. She's been doing this since she was a teenager, and she's only gotten better at it. I stared at those photos for a long time. This woman had sat at my Thanksgiving table. She'd smiled at me, shaken my hand, eaten food I'd cooked with my own hands, and the whole time she was planning to rob my son blind. What do we do? I asked. We build a case, a real one, the kind that can be handed directly to law enforcement and result in an arrest. But we have to be careful. If she finds out we're investigating, she'll disappear. Take whatever she's stolen and vanish, just like she did in Nashville. And my son? Dante's expression softened. Jerome, I'm not going to lie to you. Your son is in deep. Whatever she's done to him, psychologically, whatever manipulation she's used, undoing that is going to be harder than proving the fraud. He may not want to be saved. I shook my head. He's my boy. He'll listen. Will he? She had him stand there while she called you a bitter old man. She's had 11 months to rewire his thinking, to make him dependent on her, to isolate him from everyone who loves him. That's not something you undo with a conversation. Then we don't undo it with a conversation. We undo it with evidence. We show him the truth so clearly that he can't deny it. Dante leaned back in his chair. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. Over the next 3 weeks, I became someone I barely recognized. I was still running my business, still showing up to job sites, still signing off on contracts, still doing everything a man my age is supposed to do. But in the spaces between, in the early mornings and late nights, I was hunting. Dante and I worked together every day. He had resources I didn't, access to databases, contacts at banks and credit bureaus, relationships with people who could pull records that weren't supposed to be pulled. Every night, he'd send me updates. Every morning, I'd review what he'd found. The picture that emerged was devastating. Monique, had been busy. In the 11 months since she'd started dating Keon, she'd opened 4 credit cards in his name. Total credit limit across all 4, $87,000. Current balance, $71,400. She'd taken out 3 personal loans using his information. Combined value, $95,000. all dispersed to accounts that weren't connected to Keon in any way I could trace, and she'd attempted, twice, to access my business accounts. The first attempt was the phone call to Roslyn that she'd dismissed as a scam. The second was a physical visit to my bank, where someone matching Dominique's description had tried to add herself to my accounts as an authorized representative. She'd brought paperwork, forged paperwork, a power of attorney document that she claimed I'd signed, authorizing her to manage my affairs. I'd never signed any such document. The signature was a fabrication, just like the one on Keon's fraudulent applications. The bank teller had refused the request because I'd set up a verbal password years ago, something my accountant had insisted on after a fraud scare in 2015. But it was a near miss. One different employee, one moment of inattention, and this woman could have walked out with access to everything I'd built. "She's done her homework," Dante said when he showed me the bank's incident report. "She knows about your properties, your business, your net worth. She's been researching you for months. Maybe longer." "How? How does she even know about any of this?" "Public records, county assessor's office, business filings with the state. You think you're private, Jerome, but you're not. Anyone with internet access and enough patience can piece together a pretty accurate picture of what you're worth." And once she knew about the money, she made a plan. Marry Keon, get access through him. Exactly. And if that didn't work, if you didn't die soon enough or Keon didn't inherit fast enough, she'd find other ways. The power of attorney was a backup plan. She was going to drain you one way or another. I thought about my daddy's coffee can, all those years of sacrifice, buried in the backyard, because he knew the world was full of people who wanted what you had. He was right. He was always right. "We need more," I said. "We need something that can't be explained away. Something Keon can't deny. I'm working on it. She's got a P.O. box registered under a third name, Denise Parker, that she uses for some of the fraudulent accounts. I've got someone watching it. If she picks up mail, we'll have photos." "What about the old victims, the ones from Ohio and Nashville? Can they testify?" "The one from Ohio won't talk. He's embarrassed, moved on with his life, wants nothing to do with this. But the Nashville victim, his name is Malcolm Prescott. He's willing. He's still angry about what she did to his son. When I told him she was operating again, he said he'd fly to Atlanta tomorrow if it meant putting her in prison." Malcolm Prescott. I didn't know this man, but I owed him more than I could express. He was willing to relive the worst experience of his life to help save a stranger's son. "Set up a meeting," I said. "I want to talk to him." 3 days later, Malcolm Prescott was sitting in Zeke's conference room. He was about my age, mid-50s, grey at the temples, wearing a suit that had seen better days. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. I recognized that look. It was the look of a father who'd failed to protect his child and had never forgiven himself. "Mr. Henderson," he said, shaking my hand, "I'm sorry you're going through this. Call me Jerome, and thank you for coming." We sat across from each other, while Zeke took notes, and Dante stood by the window, watching the door. Malcolm told me his story. His son, Clayton, had met Dominique. She was going by Danielle at the time, at a young professionals mixer in Nashville. Clayton was a financial analyst, 25 years old, with a bright future and a healthy trust fund from his late grandfather. Danielle swept him off his feet. Within 6 months, they were engaged. She was perfect, Malcolm said. Too perfect looking back. She said all the right things, did all the right things, but she was always pushing for more access. More information. She wanted to know about the family finances, the investments, the real estate. Clayton thought she was just interested in their future together. When did you realize something was wrong? About 8 months in. Clayton asked me to co-sign on a loan, said he needed it for some investment opportunity Danielle had found. That wasn't like him. He'd never asked for money, never needed my help with anything financial. So I started asking questions. What did you find? She'd already taken out 2 credit cards in his name, already maxed them out. When I confronted Clayton about it, he defended her. Said there must be some mistake. Said I was being paranoid. He actually stopped talking to me for 3 months because I dared to question the love of his life. I felt that in my chest. The pain of being shut out by your own child because someone else had twisted their mind. How did it end? Malcolm's jaw tightened. She got greedy. Tried to forge Clayton's signature on a wire transfer for $150,000 from our family business account. The bank flagged it because the signature didn't match their records. When they called to verify, Clayton was standing right there. He had to admit he hadn't authorized anything. And then she disappeared, packed a bag and was gone before he got home that night, took everything in their joint account, about $50,000, and vanished. We filed police reports, hired investigators, but she was a ghost. By the time we tracked her to Atlanta, she'd already reinvented herself. New name, new look, new hunting ground. Your son, how is he now? Malcolm's eyes went distant. He's alive. He's working. But something in him broke when he realized what she'd done. He doesn't trust anyone anymore. Hasn't dated in 3 years. Barely talks to me because I think seeing me reminds him of how blind he was. Silence settled over the room. I won't let that happen to Keon, I said finally. Then don't wait for her to get greedy. Don't give her the chance to run. You hit her hard and fast, with everything you've got, before she knows what's happening. I looked at Dante, at Zeke, at the stack of evidence we'd compiled over 3 weeks of relentless investigation, forged signatures, fraudulent accounts, stolen identities, a criminal history under her real name, testimonies from previous victims, bank records showing the money trail, photos of her picking up mail at a P.O. box registered under yet another fake name. We had enough. We had more than enough. Now we needed a plan. The wedding, Zeke said, breaking the silence. It's in 16 days. She's going to make her biggest move before then. She needs to lock down the marriage to secure her access. If we confront her too early, she runs. Too late, and they're legally bound. So we do it at the wedding? I asked. No. Too public, too chaotic, and Keon would be humiliated in front of everyone he knows. That's not how you save someone. That's how you destroy them. Dante spoke up. We do it the week before. Private. Controlled. Keon needs to see the evidence with his own eyes in a setting where she can't spin it, where she can't manipulate him into dismissing it. He won't meet with me. Not after what happened at the house. He will if he thinks it's about something else. Dante pulled out his phone. I've been monitoring their social media. Dominique's been posting about wedding venues, catering tastings, all that nonsense. But there's one thing she hasn't locked down yet. The rehearsal dinner location. What does that have to do with anything? Dante smiled for the first time since I'd walked into his office 3 weeks ago. Because you're going to offer to host it. You're going to call your son, apologize for the disagreement, and tell him you want to make peace before the wedding. You'll say you want to throw them a beautiful rehearsal dinner at a nice restaurant. On you. As a gesture of goodwill. And they'll accept. Dominique will accept. She can't resist free money or the chance to show off. She'll see it as a victory, proof that she's won, that you've submitted. She'll let her guard down. And then? Dante leaned forward. And then, At that dinner, you present the evidence. All of it. In front of Keon, where she can't deny it, can't spin it, can't gaslight him into thinking it's not real. You show him who she really is. I thought about it. The risks, the potential for everything to go wrong. But the alternative, watching my son marry a predator who would destroy his life, was unacceptable. Make the arrangements, I said. Book the restaurant. Prepare the presentation. And if Keon still doesn't believe it, if she's got him so turned around that he defends her even with proof in his face, I stood up, looked out the window at the Atlanta skyline, at the city where I'd built everything I had. Then at least he'll know. And when she eventually destroys him, because that's what she does, he'll know I tried. He'll know his daddy fought for him. That night, I made the hardest phone call of my life. Keon, I said when he answered, I've been doing a lot of thinking. I was wrong. I want to make things right before the wedding. The silence on the other end stretched for an eternity. Then my son's voice, uncertain but hopeful. Really? Really? Let me throw you a rehearsal dinner. Anywhere you want. On me. No strings. I just want to be part of your life again. I could hear whispering in the background, Dominique coaching him on what to say. Then Keon came back on the line. She says, We'd like that. Thank you, Dad. I'll set it up. I'll send the details this week. I hung up the phone and looked at the calendar. 11 days until the rehearsal dinner, 12 until the wedding, 11 days to save my son. And Dominique Price, Monique Lawson, whoever she really was, had no idea what was coming. The restaurant was called Magnolia and Vine, an upscale southern fusion place in Midtown that Dominique had picked out herself. Private dining room in the back, seating for 40, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a courtyard garden, the kind of place that charged $18 for a glass of sweet tea and made you feel like you were supposed to whisper. I'd put down a $12,000 deposit to reserve the entire back section. Dominique had been thrilled when she heard. I could tell from the way Keon's voice sounded when he called to confirm the details. Lighter, almost grateful. Like maybe his daddy had finally come around and accepted his place in the new order. She thought she'd won. I let her think that. The rehearsal dinner was scheduled for Saturday evening, November 17th, exactly 1 day before the wedding. 42 guests were expected. Dominique's mother, Greta, her sister, Charlene, cousins, aunts, uncles, friends from college and work. On Keon's side, the list was thinner. A few friends from Georgia Tech, some co-workers, his cousin Alicia and her husband. And me, the bitter old man who'd finally learned his lesson. That's who they expected to show up. A humbled father, hat in hand, ready to play nice and write checks. What they got was something else entirely. I arrived at 5:30 p.m., 90 minutes before the guests were scheduled to arrive. Dante was with me, dressed in a charcoal suit that made him look like a corporate executive instead of a private investigator. Zeke was already inside, setting up in a small service room adjacent to the main dining area. We'd coordinated everything down to the minute. The restaurant manager, a woman named Patrice, who I'd spoken to 3 times over the past week, met us at the back entrance. "Mr. Henderson," she said, shaking my hand, "everything is ready. The presentation equipment is set up in the service room, and we've arranged for the doors to the private dining area to lock from the inside, as you requested." "Thank you. And your staff understands the instructions?" "Yes, sir. Once you give the signal, they'll clear the room and ensure no one enters or exits until you say otherwise. I have to admit, this is the most unusual rehearsal dinner request we've ever received. I appreciate your discretion. You'll understand soon enough." She nodded and led us inside. The dining room was beautiful, White tablecloths, crystal glassware, fresh magnolia arrangements on every table. It looked like something out of a wedding magazine. For a moment, I felt a pang of something like grief. This should have been a happy night. This should have been a celebration of my son's future. Instead, it was an ambush. I positioned myself near the entrance to the private room, where I could greet guests as they arrived. Dante stationed himself at a table near the back, laptop open, looking like he was just reviewing some work emails. Zeke stayed in the service room, ready to cue the presentation when I gave the signal. The first guest started arriving at 6:45. Dominique's family, mostly. Her mother, Greta, was a heavy-set woman with expensive jewelry and a permanent expression of mild disapproval. She looked at me like I was the help when I introduced myself. "So you're Jerome," she said, not offering her hand. "Dominique told me about you. All good things, I hope?" "She said you were difficult, that you tried to control Keon's finances and interfere with their relationship." Greta's smile was thin and cold. I told her not to worry. Men like you always come around eventually. I smiled back. "Yes, Mum. I suppose we do." More guests filtered in over the next 30 minutes. I shook hands, made small talk, played the role of the reformed father who'd seen the error of his ways. It was exhausting, pretending to be something I wasn't. But every time I felt my mask slipping, I reminded myself why I was here. For Keon. For my son. He arrived at 7:15, Dominique on his arm. I hadn't seen him in over a month, not since that confrontation at my house when she'd called me a bitter old man and he'd asked for money instead of apologizing. He looked different now, thinner. There were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. And Dominique, she was radiant, glowing, dressed in a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than some people's rent, diamonds sparkling at her ears and throat. She walked into that room like she owned it, like everyone there existed only to serve her. "Dad," Keon approached me, hesitant. "Thank you for doing this. It means a lot." I pulled him into a hug, held him tight. Felt how stiff he was, how uncertain. "I love you, son," I said quietly. "No matter what happens tonight, remember that. Everything I do is because I love you." He pulled back, confusion flickering across his face. "What do you mean? No matter what happens?" Before I could answer, Dominique inserted herself between us. "Jerome." She said my name like she was testing a new flavor. "This is so generous of you. I know we've had our differences, but I'm glad you've decided to be supportive. Family is so important." "It is," I agreed. "That's why we need to protect it." Something flickered in her eyes. Suspicion, maybe, or just annoyance at my word choice. But she recovered quickly, turning to greet her mother with an exaggerated display of affection. I watched her work the room for the next hour, laughing, hugging, accepting compliments on her dress and her ring and her future. She was good. I had to admit that. If I didn't know what I knew, I might have believed she was exactly what she pretended to be. But I did know, and every smile, every laugh, every touch of my son's arm, it all looked different now. Calculated, predatory. At 8:30, after the appetizers had been served and the champagne was flowing, I caught Dante's eye across the room. He gave me a small nod. It was time. I stood up from my seat at the head of the table and tapped my glass with a fork. The room gradually fell silent, all eyes turning to me. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," I began. "Tomorrow, my son is getting married, and as his father, I wanted to take this opportunity to say a few words about love, family, and truth." Dominique was watching me with a fixed smile. Keon looked nervous. When Keon was born, I made him a promise. I told him I would always protect him, that no matter what happened, I would be there to keep him safe. For 26 years, I've tried to live up to that promise. Sometimes I succeeded. Sometimes I failed. But I never stopped trying. I paused, letting the words settle. Tonight, I have to keep that promise one more time. And I'm sorry that it has to happen this way, in front of all of you. But my son needs to know the truth before he makes the biggest decision of his life. The smile on Dominique's face was starting to crack. "Jerome," she said, her voice carrying a warning. "This isn't the time. It's exactly the time." I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Zeke. One word. Now. The lights in the room dimmed slightly as a projector screen lowered from the ceiling, one of the special arrangements I'd made with Patrice. There were murmurs of confusion from the guests. "What is this?" Dominique's voice was sharper now. "Keon, what is your father doing?" Keon looked between us, frozen. "Dad, what's going on?" "I'm showing you something you need to see, something I've spent the last month putting together, and I'm asking you, begging you, to watch with an open mind." The first image appeared on the screen. A mugshot. Monique Lawson, age 19, arrested for check fraud in Cleveland, Ohio. "This is your fiancée," I said. "Her real name is Monique Lawson. She was arrested for fraud when she was a teenager." The charges were dropped when the victim's family refused to testify because she was dating their son at the time. The room erupted in whispers. Greta shot to her feet, face contorted with rage. "This is outrageous! How dare you!" "Sit down, Greta, or leave. But this presentation is happening either way." She looked to Dominique for guidance. Dominique's face had gone pale, her composure finally cracking. "This is a lie," she said, but her voice shook. "Keon, baby, this is all lies. He's trying to break us up because he can't stand that you don't need him anymore." I didn't respond to her. Instead, I advanced to the next slide. Another mugshot. Same woman, 2 years older. Arrest record from Cincinnati. At 21, she was arrested again. This time, she'd gotten engaged to a young man from a wealthy family. During their relationship, she opened 11 credit cards in his name, took out 2 personal loans, and forged his signature on a home equity line of credit. The slide changed. Court documents, conviction records, sentencing details. She was convicted on 4 counts of fraud, sentenced to 3 years, served 18 months at the Ohio Reformatory for Women. I looked at Keon. His face was ashen. He was staring at the screen like he was watching a car accident in slow motion. After her release, she legally changed her name to Dominique Price. She claimed identity theft as the reason for the change. She moved to Nashville, where she targeted another young man with a wealthy family. His name was Clayton Prescott. New slide. A photograph of Malcolm Prescott and his son Clayton. Then a text message from Malcolm. "I'm willing to testify to everything she did to my family, whatever it takes to stop her from hurting someone else's son." She drained $50,000 from Clayton and his family before she disappeared. When they tried to find her, she was already here, in Atlanta, reinventing herself again. Dominique was backing away from the table now. Her eyes were darting toward the exits. But when she reached the main door, she found it locked. "You can't leave," I said calmly. "Not until we're done." "This is false imprisonment." Her voice cracked with genuine fear now. "I'll sue you. I'll have you arrested." "For what? Showing evidence at a dinner I paid for? The doors will open when I'm finished. Until then, you're going to stand there and listen." I turned back to the screen, back to my son. "Keon, in the 11 months since you've been with this woman, 4 credit cards have been opened in your name. Total credit limit, $87,000. Current balance, over $71,000. New slide. Screenshots of the fraudulent accounts. Statements showing charges he'd never made. Signatures that looked like his, but weren't. 3 personal loans have been taken out using your information. Combined value, $95,000. The money was sent to accounts that have no connection to you. Another slide. Bank records showing the transfers. Account numbers that belonged to shell companies and empty LLCs. She's also attempted to access my accounts. Twice. Once by calling my accountant and pretending to be from a bank. Once by physically visiting my bank with a forged power of attorney document. The slide showed the incident report from the bank, the forged signature that was supposed to be mine. This woman has stolen over $160,000 from you, Keon. And if you marry her tomorrow, it will get worse. She'll have legal access to everything you have, everything I've built for you. Keon was shaking. Tears were streaming down his face. He turned to Dominique, searching for something. Denial, explanation, anything. Tell him it's not true, he said. Tell him, Dominique. Tell him this is all lies. Dominique's mask was gone now. The sweet, charming woman had vanished, replaced by something feral and desperate. She was backed into a corner, literally and figuratively, and she knew it. "Baby," she said, her voice trembling. "Your father is manipulating you. He's always hated me. He fabricated all of this because he can't stand to see you happy." "The signatures," Keon interrupted. "On those credit card applications, they look like mine. They're forgeries. He probably hired someone to—" "I know my own handwriting, Dominic." His voice cracked. "I know what my signature looks like. And those are close, really close. But the E is wrong. The loop is backwards." He turned to me, tears still falling. "Dad, the E. You noticed it too, didn't you?" I nodded. "I taught you to sign your name when you were 16, son. I know your signature better than anyone." "How?" Keon's voice was barely a whisper now. "How did she get so close?" "Practice, patience, access to your existing documents. She's been doing this for a decade, Keon. She knows how to forge a signature that passes a casual inspection, but she couldn't fool the people who really know you." Dominique made a break for the service room door. Dante was there before she could reach it, blocking her path with his linebacker's build. "Sit down, Miss Lawson," he said calmly. "We're not done yet. My name is Dominique Price." "No, it's not. And by tomorrow morning, the Atlanta Police Department will have everything we've gathered tonight, including testimony from Malcolm Prescott, who's already given a statement about what you did to his son." The fight went out of her. I watched it happen, watched her realize that there was no escape, no spin, no manipulation that could save her this time. She slumped into a chair, staring at nothing. Greta was screaming something about lawyers and lawsuits. Charlene was crying. The rest of the guests sat in stunned silence, watching a family implode in real time. But I only had eyes for my son. Keon stood in the middle of the chaos, looking like a man who'd just woken up from a nightmare, only to find himself in a worse one. He stared at Dominique, at the woman he'd been about to marry, the woman he'd defended against his own father, the woman he'd loved. Then he looked at me. "Dad," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I crossed the room and pulled him into my arms, held him while he sobbed, felt his whole body shake with the weight of what he'd just learned. "It's okay, son. I've got you. I've always got you." Over Keon's shoulder, I watched Dante make a phone call, watched Zeke gather the evidence files, watched Dominique sitting in that chair, staring at the floor, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. Then I heard sirens in the distance, getting closer, and I held my son tighter, because the hardest part was still to come. The police arrived at 9:47 p.m. 2 officers came through the front entrance of Magnolia and Vine, followed by a detective named Cordelia Watts, who Dante had been in contact with for the past week. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, dressed in a navy blazer, who moved through the stunned crowd of guests with the calm efficiency of someone who'd seen worse. Monique Lawson. She stopped in front of the chair where Dominique sat frozen. Also known as Dominique Price, also known as Danielle Parker. Dominique didn't respond, didn't even look up. You're under arrest for identity theft, credit card fraud, forgery, and attempted grand larceny. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As Detective Watts continued reading her rights, something in Dominique snapped. She exploded out of that chair like a woman possessed, screaming, clawing at the air, trying to get to Keon, who was still standing next to me, with tears streaming down his face. "You did this!" she shrieked at me. "You ruined everything! We were going to be happy! We were going to have everything!" One of the officers grabbed her arm. She spun and raked her nails across his face, drawing blood. The other officer moved in, and suddenly she was on the ground, thrashing and screaming while they worked to get handcuffs on her. "I'll kill you!" She was looking right at me, eyes wild with rage. "You hear me, old man? I'll kill you for this. I'll find a way. I'll make you pay." The guests scattered. Greta was screaming at the officers, demanding they release her daughter. Charlene had collapsed into hysterical sobs. The carefully orchestrated evening had descended into pure chaos. But through all of it, I kept my hand on Keon's shoulder, kept him grounded, kept him with me. They dragged Dominique out through the service entrance. Her screaming echoed through the restaurant long after she was gone, fading only when the police car doors slammed shut. Detective Watts approached us after the scene had cleared. "Mr. Henderson," she said, shaking my hand, "your investigator did excellent work. Between the financial records, the forged documents, and the testimony from the previous victim, we have more than enough to make these charges stick." What's she looking at? Multiple felony counts across multiple jurisdictions. Ohio will want her for parole violation. She never completed her supervised release after her first conviction. Tennessee has an outstanding warrant for the Prescott case. And here in Georgia, the identity theft charges alone carry up to 15 years. 15 years. Possibly more once everything was combined. I nodded. "Thank you, Detective." "Thank your friend." She glanced at Dante, who was standing near the door with Zeke. "He's the one who connected the dots. Most fathers in your position would have just cut ties and walked away. You saved your son from something much worse than a bad marriage." She left to coordinate with her officers. The restaurant staff began quietly clearing the tables, their eyes carefully averted from our family disaster. Keon hadn't moved, hadn't spoken since Dominique was taken away. "Son," I said gently, "let's get out of here." He followed me like a sleepwalker. I guided him past the wreckage of what should have been his rehearsal dinner, past the whispers and stares of the remaining guests, out into the cool November night. My truck was parked in the back lot. I opened the passenger door and helped him in, then walked around to the driver's side. For a long moment, we just sat there in the darkness. Father and son. Silence between us. Then Keon spoke. "I almost married her. But you didn't. Because of you. Because you wouldn't give up on me, even when I gave up on you." He turned to face me, eyes red and swollen. "Dad, I said terrible things. I let her say terrible things. I stood there while she called you a bitter old man, and I didn't defend you. I asked you for money instead of apologizing. Stop!" I held up my hand. "We're not doing this tonight. Tonight, we go home. We rest. Tomorrow we'll talk, but right now, all that matters is that you're safe. The wedding. There are people flying in. The venue. The caterer. I'll handle it. All of it. You don't have to worry about any of that." He broke down again. Deep, shuddering sobs that shook his whole body. I pulled him into an awkward embrace across the center console and let him cry. My boy. My only child. The baby I'd held in the delivery room 26 years ago. The toddler I'd taught to walk. The teenager I'd raised alone after his mother died. He was broken right now. But he was alive. He was free. And we were going to rebuild. I drove him back to my house in Decatur, put him in his old bedroom, the one I'd kept exactly as he'd left it when he moved out for college. He was asleep within minutes, exhausted by the weight of everything that had happened. I sat in my den until dawn, watching the sky lighten through the window, thinking about Camille. She would have known. She would have seen through Dominique from the first moment. Camille had a gift for reading people. She used to say she could tell the difference between someone who wanted to help and someone who wanted something. If she'd been alive, none of this would have happened. But she wasn't alive. So I'd had to do it myself. I kept my promise, I said to the empty room. I protected our boy. The silence answered back. But somehow it felt like she was listening. The next 6 months were the hardest of my life. Cancelling the wedding was just the beginning. There were deposits to forfeit, guests to notify, gifts to return. Keon couldn't handle any of it. He could barely get out of bed for the first 2 weeks. So I did it all. Made the calls, wrote the emails, dealt with the vendors who wanted their money regardless of the circumstances. Then came the financial cleanup. The damage Dominique had done to Keon's credit was catastrophic. The fraudulent credit cards, the forged loans, the maxed-out accounts, all of it was tied to his name, his social security number, his identity. Untangling the mess required lawyers, accountants, credit bureaus, and more paperwork than I'd ever seen in my life. Zeke connected us with a specialist in fraud recovery named Thornton Hayes. He was expensive, but worth every penny. Over the course of 4 months, he systematically disputed every fraudulent account, filed reports with every relevant agency, and rebuilt Keon's credit from the ground up. The good news, Thornton said at our final meeting, is that most of the creditors are dropping their claims. Once they saw the evidence of forgery and the police reports, they didn't want the liability of pursuing a fraud victim. Your son won't be responsible for any of the debt she accumulated in his name. And the bad news? The bad news is that this will follow him for years. His credit history is marked. Every time he applies for a loan or a lease, he'll have to explain what happened. It's not fair, but it's reality. I looked at Keon, who was sitting beside me. He'd lost weight over the past months. The shadows under his eyes had deepened, but there was something else there now, something that hadn't been present at that rehearsal dinner. A quiet strength, a hard-won wisdom. "I can handle it," he said. "It's a small price for getting my life back." That night, we had dinner together at my house, just the 2 of us, like the old days. I made his favorite, smothered pork chops with rice and gravy, collard greens, cornbread from scratch. We ate in comfortable silence, then moved to the den with glasses of sweet tea. "Dad," Keon said after a while, "I need to tell you something. Something I should have said months ago." "I'm listening." He took a deep breath. "When I was with Dominique, I knew something was wrong. Deep down, I knew. But I convinced myself I was being paranoid. She was so good at making me feel like I was the problem, like my doubts were a sign of my own issues, not hers. That's how manipulators work, son. They make you distrust yourself. I know that now. But what kills me is that I had people trying to warn me. Alicia tried to talk to me about her concerns. A couple of friends from work said she seemed controlling. And you, his voice cracked. You tried hardest of all, and I pushed you away. You were in love. Love makes us blind sometimes. It wasn't just love. He shook his head. It was easier to believe her than to face the truth. If she was the problem, then my whole life was a lie. If you were the problem, then I just had a difficult father. One of those was easier to accept. I understood. More than he knew. When your mama died, I said slowly, I spent 6 months being angry at her doctors, blamed them for not catching it sooner, for not fighting harder, for not saving her. It was easier than admitting that sometimes people get sick and die, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. Keon looked at me. You never told me that. Because I was ashamed. I was a grown man throwing blame around instead of grieving properly. But eventually I had to face the truth. And when I did, it nearly broke me. But it also set me free. How long did it take to feel free? I thought about it. A long time, years. But every day got a little easier. And one day, I woke up and realized I could remember your mama without pain. I could think about her and smile instead of cry. I want that, Keon said quietly. I want to wake up one day and not feel like an idiot for being fooled. You will. I promise you will. Dominique's trial happened 8 months after her arrest. The prosecution had built an airtight case. They had the financial records, the forged signatures, the testimony from Malcolm Prescott and his son Clayton. They had bank records showing the money trails, P.O. box registrations under fake names, and a pattern of fraud spanning a decade. But the most damaging testimony came from someone I hadn't expected. Greta, Dominique's own mother. It turned out Greta had known about her daughter's activities for years, had even benefited from some of the stolen money. But when faced with the possibility of being charged as an accessory, she'd made a deal with prosecutors. Full cooperation in exchange for immunity. She testified for 3 hours, described how Dominique had started running scams as a teenager, how she'd learned to target men with wealthy families, how she'd perfected the art of the long con, getting close, earning trust, then systematically draining her victims of everything they had. She called it harvesting, Greta said on the stand, not meeting her daughter's eyes. She'd identify a target, cultivate the relationship, and then harvest whatever she could before moving on. Keon Henderson was supposed to be her biggest score yet. His father's money, the properties, the business. She'd researched all of it before they even went on their first date. Dominique sat at the defense table, expressionless. The sweet, charming woman from my Thanksgiving dinner was gone. In her place was something hollow, something empty. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 12 years in federal prison, to be followed by state sentences in Ohio and Tennessee. She'd be in her 40s before she saw freedom again. And with her record, with the publicity the case had generated, her days of harvesting were over. I watched them lead her away in handcuffs, watched the door close behind her, felt something release in my chest that I'd been carrying since that October night when I first saw her mugshot on my laptop screen. It was over. 2 years passed, slowly, painfully, beautifully. Keon moved back to Atlanta after the trial, not to his old apartment. That place was tainted with too many memories. He got a new place in Decatur, just 20 minutes from my house. We had dinner together every Sunday night, just like we used to before Dominique came into his life. He went to therapy, worked through the trauma of what had happened to him, learned to recognize the signs of manipulation that he'd missed before. It changed him, made him more cautious, more observant, but it also made him stronger, And then, a year after the trial, he met someone. Her name was Zora Mitchell. She was a pediatric nurse at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, a woman who spent her days caring for sick kids and her weekends volunteering at community health fairs. She was kind, genuine, and completely unimpressed by material things. She was everything Dominique wasn't. Keon brought her to meet me on a Sunday evening in June. I watched them together. The way she listened when he talked, the way she made him laugh, the way her eyes lit up when he walked into the room. And I saw something I'd been afraid I'd never see again. My son was happy. "She's wonderful," I told him later that night, after Zora had gone home. "Hold on to her." I planned to. He smiled, and for the first time in years, the smile reached his eyes. But I'm taking it slow this time, really getting to know her. No rushing, no ignoring red flags, no making the same mistakes. That's wise. I learned from the best. He looked at me. "Dad, I never properly thanked you. For everything. For not giving up on me. For saving my life. You don't have to thank me, son. That's what fathers do. Still, thank you." I pulled him into a hug, held him tight, felt the steady beat of his heart against my chest. Keon and Zora got married 2 years later. Small ceremony, close family only. Held in the backyard of my house, Indicator, under the same oak tree where I used to push Keon on a tire swing when he was 5 years old. I walked him down to the altar, an unconventional choice, but one he insisted on. "You're the reason I'm here," he said. "You should be by my side." Zora's father, a retired firefighter named Roland Mitchell, performed the ceremony. He'd gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion. His voice cracked twice during the vows, and by the time he pronounced them husband and wife, there wasn't a dry eye in the backyard. At the reception, I stood up to give a toast. "When Keon was born," I began, looking out at the small gathering of people who loved my son, "I made him a promise. I told him I would always protect him, that no matter what happened, I would be there to keep him safe." I looked at Keon, at Zora, at the life they were building together. Some promises are easy to keep, others cost you everything you have. But the ones worth keeping, the ones that really matter, those are the ones you hold on to no matter what. I raised my glass. To Keon and Zora. May you always protect each other. May you always fight for each other. And may you always remember that love isn't about what you can get from someone. It's about what you're willing to give. Everyone drank. Keon wiped his eyes. Zora kissed his cheek. And I sat back down, at peace for the first time in years. That night, after the guests had left, and the caterers had packed up, and Keon and Zora had driven off toward their honeymoon, I sat alone in my den. Same leather chair I'd owned for 15 years, same view of the backyard where I'd taught my son to throw a football. The phone buzzed, a text from Keon. "Thank you, Dad, for everything. I love you." I typed back, "I love you too, son. Always." Then I put the phone down and looked out at the night sky. The stars were out, the cicadas were singing, and somewhere, in whatever place exists beyond this one, I could almost feel Camille smiling. We did it, baby. We raised a good man. I closed my eyes and let the peace wash over me. Some battles are worth fighting, some promises are worth keeping, and some loves, the real ones, the ones that matter, those are worth protecting with everything you have. My name is Jerome Henderson. I'm a plumber's son from Macon, Georgia. I built a life, raised a child, and saved my boy from a predator who tried to take everything we had. And if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change a single thing.